Next, a special report from the Lugansk Republic, where our correspondent managed to exclusively enter the territory of an alleged illegal prison facility used by Ukraine's Aidar battalion. The Aidar battalion has been fighting on the ground in eastern Ukraine since the initial conflict flared up there in 2014. The military group includes around 400 members and is infamous for allegedly glorifying Nazism and committing war crimes. The alleged prison facility, visited by our correspondent, is believed to have been used to torture members of the Lugansk People's Militia, or even those who supported them. RT's Maria Fanoshina reports from the scene.
The notorious Aidar Nationalist Battalion, an assault group of the Ukrainian ground forces, was stationed here. They turned this former sausage production facility into their base. You can see it's very well fortified. And I say notorious because Amnesty International and the OSCE repeatedly reported numerous human rights violations by the members of this group, and UN has reported dozens of criminal investigations into their activities with charges including abduction, kidnapping, brutal behavior, sexual violence, and these people were Kiev's official representatives on the ground. We are the first journalists entering this base. This place looks like a real fortress, but Aidar didn't have a chance to test it. They'd left the base before the Lugansk Republic Army got even close to the town. This is where Aidar members were sleeping, and we can see it's burned here. We were told that this is what they did while leaving, not to leave behind any proof of their activity. And we cannot go any further because we were told again that it could be mined. And again, we are the first journalists working on the ground, so this area was not cleared yet. Wow, that is a very heavy door. We enter the main building on the territory. This is where sausages were manufactured before Aidar occupied this place back in 2014. It's clear it had nothing to do with meat production. In what used to be a big smoking department for the meat to be dried and cured, there is a bale of hay and some dirty clothes in the rooms a floor below that could be seen through a metal grid in the floor. A number of local officials believe Aidar members used it as their secret prison.
The Ukrainian media confirmed this. They have numerous recordings. There's footage from there. We received testimony from people who were held there. One woman was kept there for 58 days. Another victim was kept for 38 days. There were acts of torture, beatings. Such horrors are hard to imagine in 2022.
There are many videos that appear to show Aidar members being trained by instructors from NATO countries. And here is more data pointing at the group's possible connections with the West. This is what was found, among other things, here at the Aidar Battalion base, a very interesting piece of literature titled Tutorial for Participants of Russian-Ukrainian War. It was published in 2021. It actually says that it was republished last year, so apparently there was a previous version of this book. Ukraine's Defense Ministry is among publishers, but here we see something more interesting. National Endowment for Democracy, America's non-governmental organization allegedly affiliated with CIA. And here's a piece of uniform. It's a NATO one. Ukraine's armed forces, Ukrainian flag here, with several awards for participating in counter-terror operation. This is what Kyiv launched back in 2014 against then the country's easternmost regions of Donetsk and Lugansk. This one, war veteran. This one for liberating Lugansk region. The Aidar Battalion is famous for glorifying neo-Nazi ideas and wearing Nazi symbols. Locals complain they were terrorized by members of this group. Well, those brave enough who have spoken out, most still are afraid and prefer to keep silent.
We found one resident willing to speak, but it still took some time to convince her.
Nina Mikhailovna lives next door to Aidar Battalion member. Actually, they share this backyard. Before, she complained about her neighbor, and we came to talk to her. We want to hear her story about why she was not happy.
Він мене оскорбляв, систематически оскорбляв. Забрав мою часть, половину землі, він поставив свою саму стіну. Ви представляєте, постоянно він мені угрожав, это ідіота кусок.
Nina's neighbor wasn't home. His door is broken. And even though IDAR members left this town, this story here is far from over.
IDAR is banned in Russia like the Taliban or ISIS. Ironically, official Kiev has never denied their criminal activity. The country's legal authorities have documented over 30 crimes committed by this group. But what's interesting, no case was ever opened. And this is something the officials from the Lugansk Republic say they are going to immediately do as soon as this area is cleared from mines and they are able to come to this thing to investigate. Marie Finoshna, RT, exclusively from the base of IDAR battalion.
Russia dictator Jean Bricmont says Ukraine has been used by NATO to foster the bloc's own agenda.
It's very hypocritical. They have pushed the Ukrainians to refuse to, first of all, entertain the idea that they might become soon member of NATO and to refuse every negotiation with the Donbas regions. And they've pushed them to that. And the Ukrainians have believed that they were protected by NATO. And when the invasion came, the Russian invasion, or special operation, if you wish, they were left dry. I mean, NATO did not send troops, and they are not going to put them into NATO. So, I mean, the Ukrainians have been, used basically by the United States, because there is no big difference between NATO and the United States, as pawn in the war against, or sort of a Cold War or general war against Russia. And the poor Ukrainians, I mean the Western Ukrainians at least, have been, paying the price for that. And I think it's pretty outrageous. In fact, the people who claim that this is helping Ukraine is fairly hypocritical, because they will send weapons, but the weapons, I think, will eventually fall into Russian hands.
Now, Washington's envoy to the UN has accused Russia of war crimes, saying it's targeted civilians in Ukraine. That's the first direct such accusation from a US official, which follows the ambassador's earlier comments on allegations brought against Moscow.
Any attack on civilians is a war crime, and we're working with partners to collect and provide information on this.
Moscow has always denied targeting civilians, stressing it strikes only military targets. And Russia's foreign minister has noted that war crimes claims from the West are remarkably hypocritical.
The United States and its allies are directly responsible for multiple violations of human rights and international humanitarian law, guilty of crimes which hundreds of thousands of ordinary people in Yugoslavia, Iraq, Libya, Afghanistan fell victims to, once again demonstrating double standards.
The comment came in regards to wars conducted by the US and its allies. That includes the 1999 NATO bombings of Yugoslavia, where around 500 civilians were killed by the strikes, according to Human Rights Watch. The US invasion of Iraq from 2003 claimed some 200,000 civilian lives, according to the Iraq Body Count Project, and around 70,000 civilians were killed during the two-decade NATO campaign in Afghanistan. Among the last to die were 10 civilians, including 7 children, in a Pentagon drone strike on Kabul in August, with no one held accountable. A political science lecturer told us Washington makes human rights claims against others that it refuses to apply to itself.
We all remember the various wars that have been waged by NATO or by NATO states. Yugoslavia in 1999, Libya 2011, Iraq by Britain and America in 2003. The West has made all kinds of allegations against Russia in particular that, this is the worst war in Europe since 1945. They've simply forgotten or chosen to forget their own military operations, both in 1995 against the Bosnian Serbs, and then, of course, in 1999 against Yugoslavia. Both of those took place in Europe. While America refuses jurisdiction for itself, it has a roving ambassador and an office for human rights violations, which indeed requires that other countries be subjected to this same human rights jurisdiction which it refuses. So this hypocrisy goes back a long time, long before the Ukraine war.
A wave of protests is rising in some countries as wheat and corn-produced product prices hit record highs. In recent days, hundreds of people gathered in the south of Iraq to voice their anger over skyrocketing prices. Russia and Ukraine are essential suppliers of wheat and corn to global markets. Together, both countries make up more than 25% of the world's export. But since the special operation in Ukraine started, many global supply chains have been disrupted. As a result, wheat prices soared by 37% and corn prices jumped by 21% in just the past 2 months. Ahmed Wushti, president of the House of Iraqi Expertise Foundation, believes that the Western sanctions imposed on Russia are now pushing some countries to the verge of famine.
The Russian-Ukraine crisis showed to the world is that how much important Russia and also Ukraine for the food industry in the whole world. The Western countries until now didn't have any real agenda, any real roadmap to compensate food products from Russia and Ukraine. The storage of wheat in every country, especially in the Middle East, start to be lost day by day, and there is no compensation. Why the Western countries made a blockage when they know very well it will affect food prices in the whole world, especially in the Middle East and especially in Iraq. The Western countries didn't give us any solution for that. Is that keep patient, it's going to work. And we all know it does not work. What we have now is some sort of a Western failure to lead the world.
While some Middle Eastern